Welcome to Selling Circular.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to Selling Circular, the podcast dedicated to exploring the innovative minds and business models shaping our transition to a circular economy. I'm Sabir Lakhani, new VP of Product at SpareTech.
And I'm Garb Hunnett, suppressing the giggles from all of the re-edits we've had to do on this intro. But we've gotten it down, and I'm the CEO of LoopLayer. It happens, people, when we're trying to get the intro down and we just aren't getting each different syllable right, and we just need to keep restarting. But not today, because we're diving into one of the most challenging aspects of the circular economy, which is how do you recover and recycle building materials at scale? Well, Preston Poag Jr. joins us from Dalton, Georgia, the carpet capital of the world, where he manages Mohawk Industries' Recover program. For those unfamiliar, Mohawk is one of the largest global flooring manufacturers, and their Recover program has been pioneering this flooring recovering and recycling program since 2006. So they've been working at this for almost 20 years, and so we actually got to really jump into this program, and they've been doing it really since really before circular economy became a buzzword.
Preston's unique perspective he brings to the conversation. Not only does he run the program that diverts millions of pounds of flooring from landfills annually, so this dual experience, both implementing circular solutions and communicating about them, it gives him real insight about the challenges and opportunities in making this kind of program and enterprise work at scale.
So what makes his work particularly fascinating is he's operating in a space where the economics can be particularly brutal and the logistics are really complex. So think about it. How do you collect used carpet from a 20-story building during a renovation in Manhattan and turn it back into a valuable material? That's tricky. How do you then convince the demolition contractor to choose a slightly and perhaps maybe more expensive recycling option in order to divert from landfill? Also a challenge. And probably most challenging of all, how do you make the residential recycling work when you're dealing with small quantities scattered across potentially individual homes instead of massive volumes in a centralized commercial location? Yes, all the fun questions we love talking about here.
So in today's conversation, we'll explore these challenges. We'll talk about the 4 to 5 billion pounds of carpet that end up in U.S. landfills every year, the role of policy in making these business models work, and why Preston believes the next generation of consumers will fundamentally change how we think about sustainable flooring.
So let's dig into some of these bigger questions and really, how do you compete against this planned obsolescence? What do you do as flooring as a service? How do you balance shareholder expectations with long-term sustainability? I'm just the question guy on this episode as I just keep throwing more at him. But let's dive in. Here's our conversation with Preston Poag Jr. from Mohawk Industries, and let's get into it. Could you talk a little bit about what it's meant, and as we sort of jump into the nitty-gritty of it, what it meant to be a part of a program that jumped from a commercial offering of the Recover program and then jumping into the residential side? Both are same sides of a coin-ish, but very different challenges of sort of recovering these types of assets from both commercial and then residential. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and benefits of both? Yeah.
Yeah, first off, I'll say thank y'all both for allowing me to speak on your podcast today. I've been a fan ever since I met you, Gar. And
oh yeah, well, thank you.
I think today is no better day to talk about recycling. It's Global Recycling Day across the globe. So talking about flooring recycling is very prevalent. But yeah, our Recover program was put into place in 2006 to try to figure out how to keep flooring material out of landfill. We tell the stat all the time that 4 to 5 billion pounds of carpet ends up in U.S. landfills every year. That's just carpet. You go into a building, now you see hard surface products. So you can imagine the scale of waste that's created just from building materials. So Mohawk, as one of the largest global manufacturers of flooring, it's like, okay, we're making this stuff, we're selling this stuff. Let's figure out how to keep the stuff out of landfill. And this conversation on circularity makes so much sense, right? So to your question, commercially, it's been a great option because you work with large clients, right? Fortune 50 clients that are building an office space or they might be renovating the office space in New York City.
Almost inconceivable size for the average
Yes.
person to understand,
Yes.
like just floors and square
Floors and
footage.
floors. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking nine floors of a headquarter building, 18 floors, and they're ripping flooring out, and they're going to have to pay for disposal at a landfill regardless. So they're going to have to pay some amount of money. But it's like, why not figure out how to find a more sustainable way to, let's say, get rid of that product, that stuff that's on the ground. So commercially, it's always been a great program. I mean, you have these Fortune 50 clients that have large sustainability goals, right? They have to abide by, and if they're going for things like lead building certification, they have to have a reclamation plan in place to do that. So all these things kind of coming together, it's like commercially great. I mean, we get a commercial client, it's great. You flip it and you look at a residential, an everyday home buyer like any of us on this call right now, and I'm actually in the market looking at houses right now in like North Georgia, so I can talk to this. It's like, if my budget is tight and I am looking to renovate my floors as a home buyer, I'm really looking at, let's say, three to five criteria: price, aesthetic, which is the look, quality, and then quality and durability kind of come together. So I'm looking at that. Price is king in that aspect of a residential client. Sustainability has never really been the conversation, but we believe it's about to be with Gen Z kind of coming into the marketplace as the home buyers, right? You're going to have a huge portion in the next, let's say, 10, 15 years of Gen Z taking over that market. And I think, I couldn't tell you the stats, but studies show that, Gen Z, millennials too, care deeply about sustainability and social impact. So we believe that in the future, people buying homes might start considering sustainability as a criteria along with those others.
And so,
sorry. Just
No,
on
go for
a
it.
personal note, I was on. There's actually Mohawk flooring in my townhome, which we just recently purchased. So
Nice.
it's pretty cool. But as somebody who cares deeply, I think I definitely felt stuck or trapped because we bought from a builder, and the builder, I am not clear like what they're going to do with the surplus. And it's also interesting, right? Because they're building they're building at scale. What might go unused in my home as surplus, that could be used somewhere else.
Right.
But then once they've sold it to me a year later, once the warranty program is up, and if I were to refresh the flooring in 10 years, kind of feel stuck as to like, wait, what am I supposed to do? I would hire a contractor and just trust them to do the work. And so it definitely feels like I had the thought, but then I'm like, what can I do about it?
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that process then? And I would love, again, we would already have sort of introduced the Recover program from our view as maybe a stakeholder in that might either on Sabira's end be essentially looking at the flooring, being like, what can I do? Or on maybe a commercial end, what can I do? What is that like on the flip side for you all? As you're talking about like what that means to be a part of the program, the identity that brings, or the agency that brings in being able to bring a solution to a client. We can take this a couple ways. We can go, what is that like to educate? What is that like to communicate? What is that pricing? I would love your perspective on how you all talk about this program and what that means to delivering that service.
Are you asking in general, or do you want me to differentiate residential and commercial?
Yeah, it was a pretty open-ended question. Yeah, we could go general, but let's go. I mean, we could go commercial because we can step back into residential because I imagine the problem set is a little bit different. You're dealing with a aggregated supply that's a little. It's not as much of a supply, so that probably poses some complications.
Yeah.
But let's go to commercial. Let's talk about commercial first, and I would love to talk a little bit about how you all approach that education, and then communicating to stakeholders, and then how you involve that in the sales cycle potential.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Education and communications are critical. For me running the program, at times I can be reactive instead of being out there. I'm not in the marketplace. I'm not talking to every client about, our program. It's really up to the sales reps in the field to sell our program to the client. And, everything, I mean, that spurs from our team educating our sales reps on how to position the Recover program to the client. And the way that I see it, Whenever a sales rep goes into a building, let's say it's a renovation, they're bidding on the project. We're trying to get new Mohawk material in there. It's like one of the first questions should always be, what's your plan for the stuff on the ground? That's an open question. They might say, I don't know. They might say, oh, we're going to send it to landfill. And then they come in, our sales rep can come in and talk about why recycling, reusing the material is actually better than sending it to landfill. And also talk about what we can provide to the client in forms of like marketing material, certificates generated. But back, I'm kind of sidetracked, but back to the process. So if you think about like a large scale building renovation, there's so many players involved. I mean, if you're going to have a general contractor that's going to be hired to do a huge job, not only demo, but installation, the whole shebang, they do everything. And the general contractor is going to hire subcontractors to handle all of these different elements. One of those subcontractors is going to be a demolition company, probably construction company. So education is not just me educating the sales rep, it's me educating the general contractor, the subs, whoever's doing the demo.
I'm just seeing the connections live here of just like, again, like how many people need to be connected downstream of sort of the nuance of this.
It is. And you have this huge connection, all these connections. And if you miss the communication in one piece of it, the whole thing can basically implode, right? So it's very critical that the communication stays straight line down all these channels of people. So when it really works is when the building itself puts out specs for the project, and in the front end they say, hey, for the demolition portion of this, we are going to reclaim the flooring. We're going to divert it from landfill. That happens, I'm happy. I am so happy because at that point, the leg's in the door, the foot's in the door. We have a program. It's going to help our salespeople sell, and we have this program that they can use as a sales tool to actually get the job. When that happens, you think about all these lines of communication and these channels of people. The general contractor then knows that if he's bidding, that he has to have a recycling program implemented for building material.
Right.
The demolition company is going to bid to the general contractor to be a sub. They have to have a plan for recycling. So all of these things being said, if the building puts it in the spec in the front end, it's going to happen. But most of the time that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So you're having to educate and kind of sell the client on why it is needed. Why should I, in some cases, pay more for disposal of this material? And when I say disposal, in our case, it's, reuse, recycling, keeping the material out of landfill. But yeah, communication, education is so critical. And if you have a break in the channel of communication, it can implode the whole project, I would say.
And Sabira, I feel like we've known a lot about that. Sabira leading, again, your work, and we were always talking about the 8-sided marketplace, or the amount of people involved, and again, that communication so key.
Yeah, and it's definitely challenging, right, to align incentives, and you were starting to hit on that. So I guess I'm curious, you're saying like in the commercial space, if it's spec'd out at the beginning of the project, you're more likely to see success. Is there something similar on the residential side that you've learned or seen that can help set y'all up for success and recover?
Residential is a little bit different, and I think, Gar, you kind of touched on this in the beginning. A commercial job, you're going to have a large amount of material, right? A large amount of material that's coming out. It's at a job site. Hey, we're going to come and pick it up through logistics. We're going to send it to a recycler. It's going to process. We do the whole thing. It's simple. Residential, you have small amounts scattered around. Logistically, from a financial perspective, and even looking at carbon emissions, it doesn't make sense to go house to house. It makes absolutely no sense. Maybe it does for things like household items like plastic bottles or boxes, like you recycle. But for flooring renovations in homes, going house to house is just not very efficient.
Isn't that like this? Well, no, I'm interrupting when you're about to say what we have to do here, and I will shut up and make what we have to do.
Yeah. Well, what you have to do in that sense is figure out how to aggregate the material in a centralized location. Is that through the dealers that are actually selling this material to the residential clients?
Oh, interesting.
Is that in a location where you're collecting material and you own a facility, a warehouse, and you just fill it? Or are you working with recyclers where they can hold material for you? You've got to aggregate it, because if not, it's going to be too expensive, too carbon intensive, and just logistically, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's my favorite odd sort of maybe barrier. I'll throw it as a barrier to circular economy, which is that it tends to, a lot of these challenges iron themselves out at scale. Where
Yes.
once you start to hit semi-truck level of inventory or assets that are being put in, the economics start to make more sense.
Yeah.
The distance make more sense. But it's strange sometimes to come at this problem with that answer, to say, hey, actually, if your whole block of neighbors actually came together saying, hey, we're going to refresh our carpets, it would be much easier
Yeah.
to actually make this happen.
Exactly.
And so, but it is a strange component of
But
circular
couldn't
economy.
you, I don't know, couldn't you build in the price? Like if if you
Well, yeah,
feel
right.
responsible as a manufacturer to ensure that your product doesn't end in landfill, right? This is when you start getting into EPR land, is
Yes. Yes.
you could price in the cost and account for it. It's not going to be the same everywhere. Rural is going to be harder than urban,
Yes.
but you could price that in. I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious if y'all have thought about it that way. And I also like that you talked about the dealer and having them, if they're a point of sale, why can't they be a point of recovery?
Point
Yes.
of
Tell us more about what has worked and what hasn't worked and what you've tried
dealerships
there.
as point of sale and point of recovery. That
Yes.
is the holy grail. Yes.
Well, I did write down a note because I do want to touch on this because I think it's very important. You brought up EPR, and if we look you can look at California as a case study for EPR with carpet specifically. If you buy carpet in California right now, there is a charge added per square yard of carpet that you purchase that is for the recyclability of the carpet at end of life. California has been doing this for, I don't know, 10 plus years. I don't know the exact number of years, but in California, it's easier to recycle carpet because it's subsidized in the front end of the purchase. And, at the manufacturers, it could make selling carpet harder because it's going to be more expensive. But EPR, you can kind of look at how that's happening there in California. New York's passing legislation right now, trying to, do a similar thing with carpet recycling, keeping carpet out of landfills. But when the government passes policy that kind of forces the hand, you're going to see a lot of times you're going to see success because the manufacturers, the producers have to have a plan in place.
Well, then, and then everyone's on the same playing field.
Exactly.
So then it's not Mohawk raising the price to compensate for this great program. It's everyone raising the price a little bit to compensate for collectively a great program, which then adds to the success that you're talking about.
Yeah, and to your point, EPR is not scaled on how big of a manufacturer you are, how much you
Right.
sell. It's a standard price across the board that you have to add when you purchase a product. But it begs the question, and I find myself asking this: if I'm a resident in California, why would I not just try to purchase carpet outside of the state and bring it back in? Because at that point, if they allow you to bring it back in the state, it would be cheaper, and at that point, you're going to be saving money. So I think some of it's a gray area, but I will say for California specifically, the recyclers we work with out there, it's sometimes free, sometimes it costs a little bit of money, but they make it so much easier to recycle. Because a lot of times, as you guys know, when we talk about circular economy, it can be more expensive. And you're trying to sell the client, the customer, on why they should invest in a more expensive solution. But when EPR is in place, it's kind of helping the economics of the whole thing.
Well, that does lead me to the next part of that question, which is when this is then introduced to a client that's coming in and saying, hey, I'm interested in this program. I have this objective that I want to meet with whatever type of ESG or green sustainable goal they've set for their organization. The Recover program is a paid service. What's that communication like in saying, hey, this is what we offer. But there's a little, you need to educate a little bit into that sales motion. You need to then, there's probably a tiny bit of convincing, maybe not a lot because they've done all the work in reaching out to you. But ultimately, there's still that little bit of barrier. What have you found as a success, or what have you heard or seen in that market where either people are additionally convinced and buy in, or they're like, oh, I didn't know, and maybe they back out? What is that relationship like in terms of communicating that to clients?
I think you have to get on the same level that the client is on. And when I say that, it's if a demolition company, if a construction company is doing the job, they're responsible for the disposal of the material, any building material that you find in a building, whether it's light fixtures, furniture, flooring, walls, whatever. They have to find a place to dispose of this. And if I just come gung ho at the construction company and say, hey, this project's going to cost X amount of dollars, here you go. A lot of times they're just going to laugh at me in my face because I'm not presenting it to them in a way that's compelling. The way that's compelling is getting on their level and saying, hey, this is what I predict that you're going to pay for landfill. Okay, this is what you're going to pay for recycling. Here's the difference. And with that difference, here's what you can do. So really, you're paying, if it's more expensive to recycle, here's the net difference. And in this net difference, you're really paying for, in some cases, marketing material. You're paying for, obviously, you're doing the right thing, right? You're recycling, you're keeping materials in circulation. But that little excess money that you're paying is actually benefiting you in the long run in all these other areas. If we didn't sell the program like that and we just sent them a number, then a lot of times they would just be like, why in the world would we do this, right? Because everything is driven by the bottom line in that kind of playground, in that area of construction and demolition. It's bottom line driven.
And have y'all experimented with offering a discount on a future purchase or any sort of reward? Like, I understand there's a cost to the Recover program, but if they're doing a refresh, right? They're going to demolition, so somebody's going to need flooring again. And if Mohawk is still trying to sell new, right, then I guess like creating that customer loyalty, that brand loyalty, has that been considered?
I think it's a good idea. The tough thing with let's say carpet or flooring material in general, hard surface even harder than soft, this stuff is going to be on the ground for 10, 15 years. This is the in hard surface could be even longer just because how durable it is. So it's a valid point, but it's like, okay, we could offer them, let's say, hey, if you spend money with our Recover program to recycle, here you go with a coupon in 10 to 15 years you can use for a refresh. I would say a lot of brands would not do that just because.
No, but wouldn't it, sorry, maybe wouldn't it be right then? Like you're demoing a building, you have to send the product back, and you're either refreshing right away or you're building up a new building like within a couple of years, like right away that product that is going to go in.
Okay, so
not
you're
the future
saying,
product.
Yeah, you're saying in the present, you're demoing the product, you're putting in new, let's say Mohawk product. Is there a discount available on top of that? At this point, we don't have anything structured like that, but I get it. I think every customer you work with is kind of different too, right? Every customer is different. You've got to figure out a way to present the program to them, to have them understand the program, and then you can play with the numbers behind everything, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, I mean, what we're trying to do is keep things out of landfill. So we're going to do it as best as we can, even if we break even. It's like we're going to do everything we can to keep this stuff out of landfill.
Well, I would love to then almost play with both of your answers and both of your your question, which is that does have something to do with the longevity of the product. When it comes to that incentive model, more likely is going to work best when you have the high turnover of a certain product and you're just rinse and repeating on essentially keeping that client within your product ecosystem. I do see where the math, while it probably might math out the same over a longer horizon period, it is maybe a little bit more difficult to to justify that when a product is sitting around or laying around for 20 years, or 7 to 10, or some during. The only thing I could see that working for sure is maybe on the commercial side with consistent refreshes
Yeah.
at the commercial space from a design standpoint.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's that tricky business model question of when do you start doing that? And it's not a total satisfying answer on my end. And Sabira, please.
Well, maybe Preston, you don't need to talk on behalf of Mohawk, but this is just maybe more like a existential question
Yes.
for flooring product or building product in general. Like, what are the margins on the new sale? Right? That's what I'm thinking about. It's like, yes, we're talking about economics and
Right.
covering the cost of recovery, but we're only looking at that narrow slice. If we have billion-dollar flooring or building material companies, and we're just ignoring, I think, the accounting of this is part of the responsibility of manufacturing responsibly. And I wonder, like, it's a hard thing to make the case for that. I totally get it. But there's like the other, maybe more like activist side of me is like, we could forego a little bit of that margin,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
it's 1 or 2%, to do the job responsibly. And I'm curious if you've kind of navigated that, or if you can opine more generally.
Yeah, I think just from a personal point of view, what I've seen and just from all the conversations I've had of people that work in corporate sustainability, when you're a publicly traded company, no matter if you're Fortune 50, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, when you have stockholders to please that are investing in your stock, that they've put their own money into it, the main thing that they're looking at really is, what's their earnings per share, how much money can they make, what is your annual report look like, what financials are you putting out there. So I agree with you from a personal perspective of, I think every manufacturer, not only flooring, but every manufacturer should invest money in sustainability or circular economy solutions, because I think in the long run it makes a lot of sense, right? If you can figure out, in this case, let's use like a textile company, like a t-shirt company. If you can manufacture a product in the beginning that's recyclable, it's used for however long, and then it can be recycled, and that, let's say, PET material can make it back into a new t-shirt. It's like that material input is going to be a lot cheaper than a virgin, let's say, PET. So in that sense, it makes a lot of sense. But looking in corporate sustainability, everything has to make economic sense. Margins are so tight, budgets are so tight, that when you present things like a sustainable idea or some kind of initiative you want to push, it's always got to be tied to what's the economic benefit. And it's just the cost of doing business, I would say.
Well, what I love about then both of that, and both the challenge and your answer in that, which was that isn't that where we are now currently at the nexus of that conversation with circular economy. That again, the argument here, and I think something that you're proving through Recover is saying, hey, clients are asking for this. This is an attractive option for clients to come to us because we have this program. Not only because you take Mohawk product, but you also take anybody else's product and you help them with that. Ultimately here now we're still, and this is what's hard to also explain to people sometimes, is we're in the infancy of proving those economics still, sometimes due to the longer time horizons of the circular motion of these products. And so I think there is a future, and what I think we're maybe all banking on is the future that we can prove these economics at the public shareholder level that says, hey, for the 1% to 2% of margin that we've given up on a technically a sale, we've gained back 3 and are therefore net positive 1% because we now offer this program and can kind of keep that. So it's like, that's our evolution, is to get to that state.
Yeah, you need to do that long-term math.
Long-term math. And that's tough. I mean, that's just, we're still growing to that.
Yeah. And I actually want to say, like, the flooring industry y'all were the pioneers in offering in the world of building materials, right? In offering take backs and thinking about how to design with nature in mind. And I think I think that maybe that's why like I asked the question is because if y'all have been leaders, then I'm sure you're asking these hard questions internally as well.
Yeah.
Well, then also just to throw it in here, just keep throwing stuff at you, Preston. I
Yeah.
think part of that too has to do with domestic manufacturing. I
Yeah.
mean, like there's an element of this that's so possible, that's made possible because of what y'all have done in terms of manufacturing still at the domestic level. I give that as a general thought to you. You can run with
Yeah.
whatever we just said in whatever direction you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, if you look at the flooring industry, you look at a lot of different industries. Now you're having to show things like recycled content. How much recycled content do you have in your material? Pre-consumer, post-consumer. I'm on the post-consumer side. You might call it pre-industrial, which is also pre-consumer. That's everything from your manufacturing plant. Um, when clients are asking for things like recycled content, you got to find a way to have that. So work in that sense. You work with R&D to figure out how you can allocate, how you can bring in recycled content into your products. So much so that it's not going to hurt the quality, the durability of the product, that it's still going to last very long, that it can still be recycled at end of life. But this point on domestic manufacturing, this also comes down to economics because yes, manufacturing domestically is great, and I'm a full supporter of always manufacturing in-house, providing jobs to people in the U.S., keeping the money here. But the problem you've seen in history is when you outsource products to places, and let's take Asia for an example, manufacturers can sometimes get those products a lot cheaper, a whole lot cheaper. And we get back to the economics conversation. But from a circular point of view, if you're sourcing materials and you're trying to close the loop, you really can't do that if you're sourcing that. If you're manufacturing domestically, you can close that loop, take your product to end of life, recycle that mechanically, chemically, advanced, however you do it, and then introduce that, in our case, fiber back into the manufacturing. Domestic, sourced, it's tricky, but again, we come back to this conversation on economics and really the cost itself of, I guess, doing business.
I want to back us maybe into a planned obsolescence. Interesting conversation here, and I think my question comes down to, I mean, how can there be circular economy business models? And this is open ended for Sabira and Preston, because I think Sabira, you also have a take on this. Is how can you sort of build circular economy business models that create financial incentives that compete against the profitability, or against compete against the profitability of planned obsolescence? That plays a little bit into, to unpack that question, my own question. That plays a little bit into flooring that can exist for long periods of time if needed, and plays a little bit into how do you exist in a circular economic model where there might be now powerful incentives to incentivize more product take back and decrease the shelf life of a product at maybe a client's location. And does that set up potentially a negative feedback cycle with planned obsolescence? I think it's an interesting thought process. It almost plays a little bit into the rebound effect idea of circular economy, that if we extract the production of a good from the extraction of resources, but this plays into a little bit more of the actual client relationship of planned obsolescence. Open-ended to both of you now, actually, on that.
Yeah, I'll go quick. This is a great question, and we're talking before this, Gar, about how I sent you the message a few days ago because I was at like a design summit, and we were talking about, I forget what topic we were talking about in that summit, but I was talking to one of my coworkers about this concept of planned obsolescence and what that really means. And my mind goes to like an Apple iPhone, of how after a certain amount of years it starts breaking down, it gets a little bit slower, and they're kind of forcing the user to purchase whatever's new. That conversation kind of spurred to, how can we do that in flooring? Well, you could make a flooring that's biodegradable, but how would you sell the client by saying, hey, If you buy our flooring in 5 to 6 years, it's going to be gone. It's going to
That's
be
such an
already.
interesting concept. Yeah.
And it's like, and actually, you're going to have to spend more money in 7 years buying new flooring because this one is no longer here. The quality is broken down so much. That conversation, we're like, okay, that wouldn't work. If you also think about this,
Or let me challenge that. It wouldn't work. Or somehow there's other intangible benefits to some sort of biophilic design that
Hmm.
like it adds some sort of quality to your living, your building in your
Well, yeah, I
certified
was gonna
building.
say like grass, right? Like I was just looking
Oh,
out the window
interesting.
while you were
Okay.
talking, right? Like you pay for grass once, you have to maintain it as a customer of
Oh,
grass,
that's fascinating.
right? And then
Yes.
there isn't necessarily a planned obsolescence, but if you don't care for it, if you don't invest the maintenance dollars, and nature happens to not be on your side,
Right.
it can go away and die, and then you have to pay all over again. And so, yeah, I don't know if to your point,
Oh,
Gar, like you could have more nature based. We just choose not to think of it that way, I guess.
I love that
In
maybe there's a
materials.
product here that a future product that maybe Mohawk has dreamed about for decades of how do we sell like a grass product, a glass or a grass flooring product that then has to be maintained
Yes.
and through some sort of service
Indoor.
model which
Indoor.
indoors which everybody would want.
I
that
would
that's
want
maybe
that.
the holy grail. Everybody would want that, but then that would be probably to your question, Preston, that would be the only way you might be able to sell that product is here's a product you have to spend more for, but look at this beautiful grass you now have indoors. Yes.
Yes. Well, so I played football in college and or played football my whole life. So my mind goes to like a football field. And even in
Hmm.
soccer right now, you look at FIFA in Europe, they banned artificial turf surfaces. So you have to
Uh,
go with grass. You look at when I guess it was sometime last year, maybe it was the World Cup or something, came to the US. I think Messi and Argentina played in Atlanta in Mercedes Benz Stadium, and they actually grew grass and brought grass in. And it's like, okay, the amount of the amount of everything involved that it would take to maintain that grass over months and months and months, is that going to offset the footprint of, let's say,
right.
artificial
Okay,
turf?
that's fair
So
enough.
in this point of like you put grass indoors, I agree. This would be awesome. I would love this. Like you walk into a space, you're talking about biophilia. It's biophilia on steroids. This is actual grass. You have dirt, but then it's like, how do you maintain that? So not only from like a circular point of view, but now you bring in like, okay, embodied carbon, water usage, energy usage. And this is why
Yes.
sustainability is complex because it's not just like a one size fits all answer. You start like picking it apart and you're like, there's never a perfect product
I
at the end of
that's
the day.
there's
But
that's
what
you're
but
so
what about the concept of flooring as a service, right? Maybe it's not grass.
Flooring as a service is an incredible idea. I think it's a great idea. You think about like event surfaces. You think about
oh
my mind goes to like a concert. Again, let's stay at like Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Let's say you have Post Malone's doing a show. Let's just lay it out. They're going to put a lot of times an event surface over the field for people to maybe sit on the floor. They're going to put a stage together, and then that stuff is going to be reused pretty much through the duration of the tour. So event surfaces is incredible. The former company that I worked with, recreational group, VersaCourt, was like a injection molded plastic tiles that kind of snap together to create recreational surfaces. Think basketball,
yeah.
pickleball, volleyball. And this is what they would do. They'd set up these courts at different locations and then, palletize it, put it on a truck, and then send it to the next place. I like the business model. To your point, I think flooring as a service makes a lot of sense. And then if you talk about like interior designers, who wouldn't want to refresh their spaces all the time? I think, yeah, flooring as a service. We've discussed this in the past. It's a great idea.
Well, then I would love to then pull that apart a little bit. Does that model then only potentially work with the largest potential clients of a CBRE, a JLL, where they've got constant refreshes of space for new tenants? Is that where that model could work?
I mean, I think it's a good point. You have these massive building management companies that are doing these refreshes. You would have to figure out, how long is the flooring going to stay on the ground?
Right.
In a contract, are you saying that, hey, after a year, we're gonna put this flooring down, and after a year, we're gonna take it up? And then I would ask the question, what happens to that flooring? Is this like a rent model where you send that flooring somewhere else?
Right.
There's not much usability on it after a year. It's probably going to be in good shape. Do you donate it to, let's say, places that might need it? Let's say local church, school system. You'd have to figure out how that would work. I know, like when, fashion as a service, when people can rent, because my sisters do this, you can rent clothing for events. You wear the clothes, you put it back in the box, and then you send it back, and then I don't know if they wash it, what they do, and then they send it to someone else. It could be a similar concept with flooring, where you're just kind of maintaining these materials on pallets. In this sense, or it depends on the flooring. I'm thinking like carpet tile, you'd palletize it, and then you could just move that from place to place. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I wonder too where the challenges lie in. And I know there's a couple models out there that are looking at, again, when you're dealing with the tiles, and you can rip up a tile, place down a new tile, and that is
Yes.
already done, and design experts have figured out how to best do that, so you can rip up any tile and you put a new tile down and it's going to look
Right.
the same. But still, that doesn't quite reach the same type of recover problem as well. It's like, well, what do you do? How do you build that into that circular aspect of that?
And look, I'm all ears on whatever ideas y'all
Totally.
have that we can implement
Yeah, yeah.
for recovery, because it's a huge problem. I think, like I said in the beginning, 4 to 5 billion pounds of carpet just in U.S. landfills per year.
Yep.
So it's like, we need solutions. We've got to work together. We got to figure this out, because at some point, landfill space it's finite, right?
Right.
There's so much space available, but if we keep wasting and have this waste culture, eventually it's going to be used up, and we're going to have to find other solutions at that point.
Well, not to move us totally off this topic, but it will. So hopefully this conversation can continue on with our audience and the community. What do you think when you're thinking about your relationship to communicating and learning from other types of leaders? What do you think, or what do you see, or what have you engaged with in terms of other misconceptions around circular economy that maybe you've seen from other leaders, or even sustainability?
Yeah. So I guess to intro this, I'll say
Right.
circularity is an aspect of sustainability. We talk to people in private, public, nonprofit, across the board, across the globe, basically, just to figure out, what are some sustainable solutions. But to your question on circularity, I'm trying to think some of the conversations we've had in the past. His name's Damon Carson, Repurposed Materials. He has
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I think he has 5 locations across the U.S. He's developed this business in a very unique way, where he can almost cover the whole continental United States, and how he's located these facilities.
We've talked about him. I don't know if he's got some major locations. We haven't had him on. Maybe this is a shout out. Maybe we can use this as a clip to get him on. But it's a fascinating model. So I think it totally rings a bell.
It's a reuse marketplace, and I got introduced to him from my work with Recover, just because it's similar. But I eventually had him on the podcast, and what he's doing is, you have materials that might not even be end of life. You have materials that are sent to a building, and let's say they have a minor defect on them. So in the past, they've gone to landfill, and it's like, oh, this is a perfectly usable material, but since it's got a tiny design problem, we're not going to use it. So what Damon did is he said, hey, we can create this whole online marketplace where we can resell goods that were probably destined for landfill, but they're perfect shape, and we can use those in different applications. So Damon, he's done a really good job. Like I said, I think 5 locations.
Well, he solved a critical function of circular economy, which is space. And that's ultimately probably what empowers his model and has made his model successful, is he gets volume of materials from clients, and then has contracted the necessary amount of open space. I think some of them are both indoors and he has
Yeah, it
outdoor
is.
locations. Because
Yep.
in some of these outdoor locations, he's in arid environments in which he can keep stuff outside, which gives it even more time and it makes the land cheaper. And then he can sell it to clients that eventually come around and say, oh, actually, we really do need this material. I love that model because, again, space and that space is that necessary equation between supply and demand in the circular economy.
Yeah, and a lot of it, to your point, is about timing. So you think
And
about like a
yeah,
let's say a waste material. If I'm a client and I've ordered X material to come to my office space, it comes, there's a defect to it. I want it gone, I want it out. I want what I've ordered in. So a lot of times it's an afterthought of just get this out and get rid of it. But what Damon has done, to your point, he has this space available, five, it might be seven locations, that he has these massive warehouses, indoor and outdoor, where he can store the material for a X amount of time before someone actually is interested in the material. And I think this is a really, really good kind of point of the circular economy is everything's got to make sense. The timing of it has to make sense. There's not always going to be a solution right here, right now. I might rip something out of a building, whatever product, but whoever's going to buy it might not want it right now. They might want it in 2 months. And if I don't have the space to hold that, then it's going to go to landfill. And that's the unfortunate thing.
It's the terrifying part of circular economy is time. Time
Yeah.
is that the enemy of the circular economy of bridging that gap between supply and demand and space. Again, I'm just highlighting that again. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I would say the circular economy too. It's like we go back to economics, but everything, it has to make sense financially, because if I'm saying I'm going to use a recycled material back into my manufacturing, but that recycled material is more expensive than the virgin, why would most manufacturers who are looking at their bottom line make that decision? It's the recycled material. If it's going back, it's got to be cheaper, or a lot of times manufacturers aren't going to do it. So circular economy is complicated. To your point, I mean, financially, the timing, the supply chain, everything has to be in place, and that's why solutions are very important. That kind of combine all of these things together.
Yeah, why we love it, right, Sabira?
Yeah,
Because it's complicated.
It's so hard. Systems change. As we wrap our time together, we normally ask our guests what they're hopeful for. Tell us what gives you motivation to keep going.
I would say, I'll just say from a personal hat with sustainability in general, it's like, to me, like, you look right now, you had a political change, and I know a lot of people in our industry right now are a little bit upset, right? Because you had an administration before that was funding sustainability. You had all these policies being passed. You had these jobs being created in the public sector, especially. But now a lot of that's being slashed, and a lot of people are like, "What's going to happen?" I'm not clear on the future. But I think what I am most excited about is just Gen Z in general. I think if you look at Gen Z and even millennials and what we've been through in the past, let's say 10, 15 years, of these things.
Don't forget about us millennials yet.
Yeah.
We can't, we're not obsolete ourselves.
Gen Z and millennials, I think that we have a passion for social impact. And I think no matter who's in office, no matter what's going on in the world, we have this deep-rooted passion. And similar to you guys having this podcast and talking about this stuff, it's like we want to get the information out there and share it with people so they know. And it's just, I love having conversations like we're having now, because I can tell that we're all passionate about this and we're trying to find solutions. And it just goes back to social impact. How can we leave this world better than we found it? And I always tell people that work in sustainability, it's like, if you work in sustainability, you've chosen a selfless career, because what you're trying to do is leave the world better for future generations. So I think anyone that works in the space, it makes me excited, just because you're basically saying, look, we're going to do the hard work now, conserve what we have, make it better, so that way our kids, our grandkids can live better than we have.
I totally appreciate because what I hear in that is that this generational title shift in how we're approaching consumption and the resources we have is above politics.
Yes.
And it's like that's a good thought to give me hope. So I appreciate that message because I think you're right. We're going to see that move beyond continual administrations, and that actually is kind of due to the fact that companies like Mohawk are continuing these programs. And I think that's key too, because ultimately that's the glue that is keeping these movements going. And then it becomes our job and your job to make sure Sabira knows or the other Sabiras out there knows to then go take a picture of that flooring and say, hey, I'm looking for a better solution. I now know who to contact. And it's like, that's our job now, is to just make sure people know.
Right.
Well, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us.
Where should people go to learn more about Mohawk's Recover program?
Yeah, so if you want to learn about the Recover program, you can go to mohawkgroup.com. And I'll give you a couple angles here. You go to mohawkgroup.com, click on the tab at the top, Sustainability, and then click on Recover Recycling Program. It'll take you directly to our microsite, which includes FAQs, our program guidelines.
Thank you, Preston. Thanks for the time today. It was great to have you.
Thank you both.